Welcome to Crossover the Pond, brought to you by 21 Media Productions and Sports Social. He's Drew Lasker, I'm Josh Sexton, and this is episode 5 as we continue our NBA basketball journey, a short hezzy tween and step away over here in the UK. And Drew is back on British soil, but there's been no rest for the wicked as he's been straight back into NBA on Prime duties this week, covering the Indiana Pacers versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll hear more about that matchup from Drew and how his Amazon experience has been so far. We'll also discuss two of the unlikely form teams from both conferences as the Phoenix Suns and the Toronto Raptors both continue to tear up trees. And speaking, Drew, of tearing up trees, Chris Paul revealed he will retire at the end of his 21st season in the NBA. So me and you will discuss our reaction to that news and CP3's legacy in the league. But first, Drew, you landed back from the US on Tuesday, you celebrated your birthday on Thursday, and you were back at work for the NBA on Prime, covering the Cavs and Pacers on Friday evening. A busy week, how's it been?
What's up, Josh? It's good to be back on British soil. You know, I forgot a little bit about jet lag. It had been 13, 14 months since I've been to the US, and when I go to that side, it's funny, I always fall right into the time zone. But when I come back east, it's a struggle bus, man. So my days have been literally just full of naps. My birthday was this past Thursday. I had the house to myself, and I literally just slept. Just tried to build up some reserves because in Cali it was nonstop, including, midnight recordings with yourself, and then straight back into Amazon duties on Friday, where I didn't finish until about 3:30 a.m. and kind of hung around London until my train at 6. So, Saturday just kind of laid around. But yeah, I'm slowly getting back into the thick of things. And, there's no rest for the weary, my man. How about you? How's your week been?
Yeah, I've had a busy week really, but one that I've watched a lot of NBA basketball, and I've had a lot of travel days and travel hours to cram some games into. The Clippers have won some games of basketball as well, which always helps my mood throughout the course of the week. So yeah, it's been a much better one, let's say, for the Clippers than maybe it was to start the season, and in turn then a much better one for me as a NBA basketball enjoyer. So, Drew, I just want to talk about this Cavs Pacers game that you covered first and foremost, because I mean it went exactly as you'd expect, with Cleveland winning in a blowout. Cleveland also beat the Clippers in what turned out to be a blowout last night. Another one where the Clippers kept it close for 3 quarters and then fumbled in the fourth quarter really. But was there anything else you noticed from the game that you covered that stood out to you from either the Pacers or the Cavaliers?
Yeah, I was very encouraged for any Indiana Pacers fans out there. The score line doesn't reflect the matchup because it was very competitive. The Pacers, I think it would be hard for any casual fan to name, 5 players on that team. But I kind of saw how the game was going to end just because from a scoring perspective, and we've talked about this, like scoring in the NBA has exploded. And if you can't score over 110 points, you're going to struggle. And I was just questioning where they were going to get a lot of their points from. And so, ultimately they went down. And impressive enough, like Indiana had won 5 games in a row at Rocket Arena, including last year's playoffs where they beat the Cavaliers in 5 games. But from the Cavaliers' perspective, they kind of been up and down this year. Free throws has been a big story with that team, they're bottom 5 in the league in free throw percentage, but they did welcome Darius Garland back, and he's a big piece to their puzzle. He had toe surgery this offseason. I believe it was the same injury that knocked him out of the playoffs last year. And, he came back earlier this season just to be knocked back out again. There was actually one play where he attacked the rim and he didn't get back on defense, and you can kind of see that look on his face, and I was like, uh-oh, he might have re-injured it, but he came back in and he finished the game. But he makes such a huge difference to that team because, they got Donovan Mitchell, who's the superstar, who's the Batman, but Garland is that Robin that they need, and Cleveland takes the most threes out of any team in the NBA. But you do need that guy that can consistently put pressure on the rim and then also get to the free throw line. Garland got to the line 7 times in the first half, and he was a constant threat in the paint of the Pacers. And so very impressed with Cleveland. I don't think their record reflects the team that they're going to be moving forward. They're going to have something to say of what happens in the East. Mitchell is having a great year this year, but I'm going to hold off on him, speak more about him a little bit later. But, yeah, overall, it was a cup game. And what's interesting is I just looked this morning, is that right now, Friday night, Toronto had basically wrapped up Group A, the same group that Cleveland's in. So the only way that Cleveland can make it through the quarterfinals is through a wild card. And right now they got the upper hand on a wild card because they're a plus 33. So right now in Group B, where you have the Pistons and Orlando Magic, both of those teams are 2-0. But you got to think they got to play each other, so one of those teams are going to lose. But right now, out of both of those teams, they hold the wild card edge. Miami actually holds the first wild card because you get 2 wild cards. There's 3 teams who advance, and then you have 2 wild cards. Right now, Miami holds the plus 46, and then Cleveland is right behind them for a plus 33. So, again, this is a competition that for us Europeans is it's easy to understand because it's something that we're accustomed to. But for the Americans, it's still trying to catch on. And we were talking about it on the comms, like what were Cleveland going to do down the stretch when they had put the game away. And they had taken the starters out with a minute to go. And so this is something that they're still trying to learn with the competition, is that every single point matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Drew have promised we're going to try and cover all teams across this podcast. I was making actually a tally last night of the teams that we have covered. I've ticked off Cleveland, even though we've not covered them at great length so far. But Drew's teased there may be some more of that to come from him, at least later in the show. But we'll do a little we'll do something exciting. I think, Drew, once we've covered all the teams, we'll do some kind of power ranking between us or something along those lines. So something for the listeners to look forward to in a couple of podcast time. But one team that we have kind of floated in little conversations. I think I had them as my understated story of the week, and even if not this past week, maybe the week before. The Phoenix Suns, Drew, they are hot, is what I've put down as my title for the agenda. They beat the San Antonio Spurs last night, and to be honest, it feels like we're living in an NBA version of the Upside Down, because a couple of the teams we were expecting to be winners have been big time losers this season. But the best part is, whenever that happens, it means there's going to be some teams who we were expecting to be bad can come into the fore as big time winners. And the best thing about a team like the Phoenix Suns is that they're sharing the sugar. 2 of their wins this past week have come with 6 guys scoring double digits. 5 guys scored double digits for them in that win against the Spurs last night, which actually goes against my prediction I made last week. My bold prediction was that Devin Booker would have a 50-point game this week, and to be honest, he didn't need to. He fouled out of a game against the Minnesota Timberwolves before he could get to 20. I think last night against the Spurs was the first time he got over 20 points all week, and yet the Phoenix Suns have still managed to keep it rolling, and that win against the Timberwolves in particular, Drew, felt like the real highlight for them of this week.
Yeah, the Suns are rolling. It's interesting because, a fan would ask, well, how could this Phoenix Suns team be thriving when you would think they probably got worse when you lose Kevin Durant and you lose Bradley Beal? But for me, I am so happy that this is happening, because I think it's fair to say that the Big Three era is extinct now, right? We can move past that. It just didn't work. Obviously it worked for the Miami Heat, and then a lot of teams tried to mimic it, but the NBA has changed since the 2010s, right? You need, and I think I've said this before, you need 8 or 9 good players to win now with the pace that these teams are playing at. You need more bodies. And so, with the Phoenix Suns, I challenge you, besides Booker, Dylan Brooks, and Jalen Green, can you name 5 players?
I have been able to now since I've done a bit more research into the match. I actually watched that Timberwolves game as well, because I've been trying to sort of watch the games that have looked the most exciting from the night before. But you may have caught me out with that before last week, to be honest, Drew.
Yeah. It just goes to say that, obviously they have Grayson Allen, who we all know. I forgot that, Mark Williams is on that team. Remember, Mark Williams was the 7-foot center from Charlotte who got traded to the Lakers, but then that trade was rescinded because he didn't pass his physical, and he's almost averaging a double-double so far this season. And then also one thing that caught my attention as well was that we constantly have this debate, not us, but you see it on Twitter about the EuroLeague and NBA, and now you got EuroLeague coaches chiming in saying, well, they could beat half the teams if they played FIBA rules. And I'm looking at someone like Nigel Hayes-Davis, right? Do you know Nigel? He played in the EuroLeague last year. He scored 50 points. He was the MVP of the EuroLeague finals. And he's only averaging 1.6 points a game and barely getting any tick. It just goes to show you how good the NBA is. But, speaking of this Phoenix Suns team, they beat the Spurs last night in their 3-game winning streak. And if you look in their last 9 games, they're 8-1. When you look at the wins, it's not nothing that you really want to celebrate. Obviously, the Spurs is a great win. That Minnesota comeback was amazing. They won at Portland, who we know Portland's a tough team at home. But those other teams are the Pacers, Dallas, New Orleans, and the Clippers twice. So those are teams that, nothing that you want to get really excited about. But really, what stands out to me, you talked about, the head honcho, but for me, it's Dillon Brooks. Over the last 5 games, he's averaging 25 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists in 32 minutes, and he's shooting 52% and 38% from the 3. And for those that don't know Dillon Brooks, he came on the scene when he played for the Memphis Grizzlies. And look at the Grizzlies. Since they traded him, they haven't been the same team. They lost that edge that they had. I was keyed in on a lot of Rockets games last year, and I watched him a little more closely. And Dillon Brooks, he's a culture guy. Like, the success that the Rockets are having now is from the foundation that Dillon Brooks helped, along with Fred VanVleet as well. But he's a culture guy, and I haven't even talked about his defense. He brings toughness to a team. And then alongside that as well, like, he can hoop. Like, offensively, this guy can play. We saw it in the Olympics. He can score. When he gets hot, he gets rolling. And so from that perspective, I'm not really surprised to see Phoenix success, because now that they have a foundation along with Devin Booker that they can build upon. They have that superstar. They got Dillon Brooks, who's going to make sure that he holds the guys accountable. He's going to police the locker room. He's going to bring edge. He's going to bring toughness to the team. And then also one thing that he mentioned was about, first-year head coach Jordan Ott. He mentioned that Jordan Ott over the offseason flew out to Toronto, had dinner with him, and he's a player's coach. He's one of those guys that constantly asks the players for feedback, and he said from day one that he had the locker room. So, shout out to Phoenix. It seems like they're pushing all the right buttons to build a brighter future. And on top of that, remember, Devin Books signed a new 3-year extension, so he's there for the long haul.
Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned that there's some unknown names on that list. You'd have caught me out with Nigel Hayes-Davis, by the way. I think I had heard that name from EuroLeague action, but had no idea he was in the NBA now.
Big time player.
All the DMP coaches' decisions on the Suns, then I just went and looked at from the Spurs game last night and was like, I'm stumped with any of those guys. But all the guys above that you'd say are NBA guys, besides maybe one, Drew, which is the name Colin Gillespie. It's not that kind of NBA name that leaps out off the list necessarily, but he's been a breakout star for the Phoenix Suns this season. He went undrafted in 2022. He's one of 3 players now in NBA history to post 150 plus points, 60 plus rebounds, and 75 plus assists off the bench through 15 games. The other 2 are Charlotte's LaMelo Ball in 2021, and Jaime Jaquez has also done it this year. So this is a guy who, coming out of nowhere, really has been a big time player for the Phoenix Suns, getting it done, filling up the stat sheet. He hit the game winner against Minnesota with Devin Booker and Dillon Brooks both off the floor, having both fouled out in that game, and finished that game with 20 points. 7 rebounds and 4 assists. And Drew, to be honest, like Colin Gillespie feels like one of those March Madness guys, like those small guards who you see like kicking around a lot in March Madness, exciting things. But I'm looking at like guys like him and Reed Shepherd and wondering, is this now like a small guards league? Like what's going on in the NBA right now?
Yeah, Colin Gillespie, I gotta say, I'm not familiar with your game. I'm just looking him up now. He played at Villanova, actually won a national championship as a freshman. Yeah, I think for guys like him, it's funny because, I think Kevin Durant actually mentioned on LeBron James podcast over the summer that the 6 foot point guard is going to become extinct unless you're elite because the players are so much larger now. You look at the point guards now, they're like LaMelo Ball, 6'7", 6'8". But for guys like Gillespie and guys like Reed Shepherd, there is room for them because of the space in the NBA. And if you can shoot the basketball at an elite level, there's always going to be a home for you. So, although, the little guys, it might be a thing of the past, but if you can stroke that thing, you're going to have all the space in the world. There's going to be a home for you somewhere in the NBA. But shout out to Gillespie. I mean, he's doing his thing. So I am aware of your game now, and I will pay more attention to you. Although, it is also ironic because the NBA is about potential, and he is a 26-year-old second-year player. So he is no spring chicken.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a very interesting article in The Athletic about him where you hear more from his college coaches. I think he did 5 years at college, so someone who stuck around at Villanova for a long while. But he was backup point guard to the one and only Jalen Brunson as well, and part of that, as you said, that national championship team, which I think contained like Josh Hart and a few other guys who are currently on the Villanova Knicks right now. So yeah, big shout out to Colin Gillespie and the Phoenix Suns who have really been getting it done over this recent stretch. But I want to move on to the team in the East, Drew, who have been tearing up trees. The Toronto Raptors, who are roaring, again, as I've put in my title for the agenda. They beat the Brooklyn Nets last night, which, we're not going to sit here and act like that's some big achievement. The Brooklyn Nets are a bad team. But as you mentioned at the top of the show, they became the first team to advance to the NBA Cup knockout stage on Friday night, albeit from a group that contains the Cavs and the Hawks for one, but most importantly, the Wizards and the Pacers, who are right in that situation with the Brooklyn Nets as bad NBA teams this year. But without taking anything away from the Raptors, they have looked good. I think, again, they were one of my understated stories of the past 2 weeks, especially Scotty Barnes and his efficient play that we're seeing this season and his ability to get it done on both sides of the ball, really. But their bench is also really turning up, Drew, behind Grady Dick and Sandro. The name is going to be tough here, so you'll have to bear with me, but I'm going to go with Mamu Kalashvili is what I'm going to go for. Let's say I've nailed that as the European in the room. Let's just call him Sandro though, Drew, and agree on that because I don't want to disrespect the guy because he's been hooping this season. He's been absolutely hooping for Toronto, and there has been so much to admire about his game, but their game in general. And again, the European influence with Darko Rajakovic as their coach. It feels like Toronto are really looking like a team who could upset some things in the East.
Yeah, again, like I mentioned with the Phoenix Suns and the way that the NBA is trending, it's about having a bunch of good guys. So when you look at, the headliners, Scotty Barnes, who we all know, Brandon Ingram, Emmanuel Quickley, all of those guys are fantastic players. But if you even just go to their stat sheet last night, they had 8 guys in double figures. I mean, when do you see that? So you talk about spreading the wealth for the Phoenix Suns. The same could be said about the Raptors. And then also, they plan in the East as well. This is a team that's won 7 straight now, so you got to take them seriously. But, I kind of dug deeper on the Raptors because, I think this is not just for the casual fan, but, analysts like yourself and me as well, that there's just a couple teams when you go into the season that you're just not going to pay attention to. And the Raptors were one of those teams on my list that just weren't going to catch my attention unless they did something like this. So I had to go and try to look and see, what was the culprit? What were they doing really well? And one thing that really stood out was, and one thing about the NBA, covering the NBA this season is what I've learned is there is so much information in this league. Like, you can go down so many rabbit holes when it comes down to stats. Like this league is littered with all kind of analytical stats. So you can find yourself going down just like you do go down those YouTube rabbit holes. You could do the same thing with the NBA. But one stat that I learned about this year that I really like is the clutch stat, which if you're within 5 points in the final 5 minutes, that's called the clutch time stats. And so last year, the Raptors were the second worst in the league. So what does that mean? That means that you can't finish games, which typically bad teams don't finish. But so far this year, they have the fourth best clutch record in the entire league. They're 5-2 so far this year. So this is a team that's trajectorying in the right direction. They're learning how to win, and learning how to win, it takes a lot of intangibles when you get down the last 5 minutes of the games. We call it winning plays. There's plays like, winning the loose ball battles or the hustle plays, or sometimes just making the extra pass. It's not always about scoring, but most importantly, it's about getting stops. It's about playing defense. And right now, Scotty Barnes, a player that I was never a big fan of, I think we got to give him his respect now. We got to give him his flowers, because if the season ended right now, I could argue for him being on the all-defensive team. Firstly, the Raptors are a top 10 defensive team, and Scotty Barnes is averaging 1.5 steals, 1.8 blocks. So again, those are stats that are winning plays, along with the scoring that he does as well. So, the Raptors are a team who, again, have made it through the finals of the cup competition. And whatever side of the fence you are about this competition, history tells me that it's a competition that is great for young teams, because you get a feel of that playoff atmosphere, that playoff pressure, which is great for young teams. And so the Raptors are going to get an opportunity to play with a little bit of jeopardy, which is a team we haven't. I mean, have they had any jeopardy since Kawhi left? I don't think so. I'm not even sure if they made the playoffs. So along with being able to play in this cup competition, which is going to help them during the playoffs the same way it helped the Oklahoma City Thunder last year, this is a team we need to start paying close attention to. Again, you go and look at their wins during the streak. I wouldn't say it's the toughest of wins, but still in the NBA, a good team is a team that take care of business. You beat the teams you're supposed to beat. So they have a huge test tonight as they're hosting the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I'll be keeping a close eye on that to see how they get on. But you're right. This is a team in the East that deserves and that are now demanding our respect.
Yeah, the Cavs will, of course, be coming off a back-to-back in that one, but it'll still be interesting to see. And the Phoenix Suns, by the way, coming up against your Houston Rockets in tonight's slate of games as well. I know Dylan Brooks has already said it'll be nice to see Ime Udoka again. I don't know if Dylan really believes that, or if he's just trying to stir that pot, poke the bear, as maybe we'll give Dylan a bit of PTSD from his time with the Grizzlies coming up against LeBron and the Lakers. But I want to just finish on Toronto now, Drew, because I can't lie. Like, I watched the Vince Carter documentary a couple of months back now, and I fell in love with the idea of there being a team from Canada that was able to be a disruptor in the league behind young up-and-comers. And though this team at the moment have some way to go to match what VC and company were able to achieve, do you think it's positive for the NBA to have a team from the North competing at the top? I feel like, as much as a lot of the Americans around the league are going to say, well, it's an American league, and like we don't want to see a good Toronto team or a good Canadian team competing at the top of the NBA. I don't see why this is a bad thing for the NBA as a product.
I honestly don't look at the Raptors as a Canadian team, and I would like to think that's the case for a lot of NBA fans. Like, the Raptors are an NBA team. I don't think people say, oh, they're from Canada. Like, they are an NBA team. I don't ever think about them being from Canada. They just happen to be located in Canada, but they're an NBA team. I mean, I think it's important because look at the impact that it made when they won those finals in 2019. You had an entire country supporting you, which is rare, right? Because there's no entire country that's going to support one NBA team, unless you're the Los Angeles Lakers, right, or the Dallas Cowboys. But for the most part, like it's regional. I just think for the NBA, you need the wealth to be spread out, and you need teams to be relevant outside of the Lakers, outside of the Knicks, outside of the 76ers, who you could say are national teams. So, teams like the Phoenix Suns, teams like the Raptors, teams like the Miami Heat are great for the league. So, this is a great story. And by the way, I didn't catch the Vince Carter documentary. When did that drop?
You'll have to get on that. I think I watched it on Amazon Prime, maybe. But yeah,
Okay.
it's a very good one. VC is just a very likable character, isn't he? And he talks a lot about winning that dunk contest and having the eyes of really America at that point from the moment he did that. And then I think that Toronto team made it to quite deep into the playoffs. I think either the second round or into the Eastern Conference Finals up against the New Jersey Nets. So it was a very, very interesting one. I love VC. He's one of my favorites.
Were you even alive during that dunk contest?
I think I would have been, but I'd have been a baby. I'd have been a baby at that stage.
It's funny because I was just having a conversation with my cousin last week in California, and we were just kind of reminiscing. And I told him I love when I get to connect with old friends, because it's funny, like when you have relationships with people that different people remember different things. So like I was, talking about stories that I remembered, and he was talking about stories that he remembered, things that I would be like, I have no recollection of that at all. So that's why I like to get with old friends and reminisce. But, the point of that is I had mentioned to him that it's funny, like at 43, in reality, the human brain it's so interesting, because I think I only remember probably about 30% of my life. Like, you live with yourself every single day, right? If I asked you, Josh, like, tell me everything that happened last week, you would only be able to show me the highlight reel, right? You wouldn't be able to tell me everything that happened from hour to hour. So, like, as humans, we only remember like 40% or less. In 2000, that dunk contest in Golden State, I remember vividly. I don't remember many dunk contests. I remember exactly where I was. I remember exactly who I was watching it with. And I actually remember my raw emotion watching Vince Carter put on a show, because it was a flawless, he didn't miss a dunk. It was incredibly flawless. It was dunks that we had never seen before. And that's just, you just rejogged my memory. That is a moment that I will never, ever forget. So I'm going to have to go back and watch that documentary.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be sure to send you a link off the back of this, Drew. But I love that as well. Like, I love how sports can tie in these moments for us and these memories and take you back to place in time. That's what it's all about, really, isn't it? The
Yeah, for
nostalgia element
sure.
of sports can be a hugely positive thing. And speaking of nostalgia and NBA origin stories and things like that, Drew, the point guard has called game. Chris Paul has called time on his NBA career, and I can't lie, this one hit me hard for my own NBA origin story. CP3 is a huge part of the reason I became a Clippers fan back in 2013, and it's as much as a reminder for me that I'm growing into my Unk era now as anything else. It's obviously sad to see such a brilliant NBA career coming to an end, and realizing that the likelihood is it will happen without a chip unless there's some kind of miracle. And Lord, if you love me, you'd find that miracle for me.
Maybe there's a trade on the horizon. You never know. It ain't happening with the Clippers. I'm telling you that right now.
But rather than dwell on the negatives here, Drew, because we're not that kind of place. We're not the kind of place to dwell on the negatives. I want to instead focus on the positives. And the rap sheet for Chris Paul is a hugely positive one. A 12-time All-Star, 11-time All NBA. He's on the NBA's 75 greatest players list. 9-time All Defense. The 2006 Rookie of the Year. And I just want to ask you, and this is not to get all ESPN talking heads about this, because I don't really care for like the debates of who's better and who's this, but like I look at the legacy that Chris Paul has left over this past 21 years, and I was sort of asking myself last night, like, is this one of the greatest point guards that the game has ever seen?
Woo, that's a great question. You know, I wouldn't say the greatest, because, for me, who pops in my head right away, three guys. Steph Curry, even though he's a a 21st century point guard, but you got Magic Johnson, you got Isaiah Thomas who stick out to me because I grew up in the 90s. But I don't even want to I don't even want to get into debates because again, a lot of times when players get down to this part of their career, the talking heads begin these type of debates, and I think sometimes it devalues that player because exactly, I mean, the question you just asked me right now, I'm going with Magic Johnson and Isaiah Thomas, and that kind of devalues Chris Paul. I just want to allow him to have this moment and just appreciate what he's brought to the NBA over the last 20 years and the impact that he's made and how I view him. And I didn't even go and look up any stats. I'm just going through specifically the eye test and what Chris Paul has meant for me and what I've seen with from my own two eyes. And he is he's a guy that that you want to root for because he's a smaller guy. He's 6'1" or whatever he is. But the biggest thing that always stood out to me is that he was never afraid. Like, he's a dog, and I'm talking DAWG, not DOG. He's a dog, and he's a competitor. He's all of the traits and intangibles that I like to think that I have as well. And so I always gravitated to him from that perspective. And then I would always admire at his size, how he was always great at getting to his spots. Like, he was great to get to that elbow free throw line area. And then for him to always have the ability to rise above taller defenders and knock that shot down. And then we must not forget as well, like, during the early part of his career, like, he was a pest defensively as well. He was always top 10 in steals. And, winning an NBA championship is really difficult. I mean, the stars have to basically align. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And you talk about his 20-year career. Remember, he's on the same timeline as LeBron James. And LeBron James played in the East. Well, Chris Paul started his career. No, he played in the West, for New Orleans. But still, I'm thinking of Charlotte. But still, I mean, it's the LeBron James era. It's the same thing when you think of someone like Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, those guys. You can't take away from their greatness because they wouldn't win a championship because you ran up against Michael Jordan. The same could be said against Chris Paul because he's in the LeBron James era. I just want to appreciate his legacy. I want to appreciate what he's brought to the game. Also, you got to remember that he was the president of the Players Association. So, the situation that these players are in now financially, you would like to think that he has a lot to do with that as well. The game is in a better place. And so I just want to salute. I tip my hat to you, Chris Paul, on the wonderful career.
Absolutely, yeah. We're all about giving flowers while the players, the athletes, the coaches, Drew. Between me and you, even we've given each other some flowers over the past few weeks too, and we're all about that here on Crossover the Pond. We're not about getting drawn into talking head conversations really. And I was sort of thinking about this last night in probably quite a talking head way really. Like, I have to be honest about that. Like, I was thinking about my top 5 favorite players of all time, and my list basically 1 through 5 goes Allen Iverson, Chris Paul, Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady, and then Lou Williams, which I know Lou Williams feels a bit like a rogue one in there, but obviously you have to allow me with that as a Clippers fan. But that's 5 non-champions, and I started to sort of like have a big think about legacy and how legacy is defined. And what I like about what you've said there, Drew, is like, it's really, really hard to win an NBA championship. And by the way, some NBA players who've been considered bad players have won NBA championships. Was it Patrick McCaw who won it with the Raptors and with the Warriors? And I think he's like not even in the league anymore now. So there are guys who've left no real legacy in the NBA, but will walk away with NBA championship rings. There are guys who've left massive legacies, and the truth of that is that legacies are individual to players. And I love that you've mentioned the sort of dog mentality from Chris Paul there, the defensive chops, because when you think about Chris Paul, you think about playmaking, and you'll think about the offense that he contributed to in terms of the Lob City era Clippers, and you'll think about the impact he had on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the OKC Thunder now that they're really rising to the fore. And you probably won't think about the not even necessarily the intangibles, because his defense was so premier at one point. I mean, I've mentioned there 9-time All Defensive honours for Chris Paul. So legacies are individual to each player, and I think that's something that we should be, absolutely celebrating here on Crossover the Pond. But really, the NBA discourse should celebrate more, is that we don't necessarily have to look at an Allen Iverson or a Chris Paul or a Vince Carter or a Tracy McGrady and say, oh, those guys didn't win rings and these guys won rings, so these guys are infinitely better. Let's focus on individual legacies and individual players and what we saw and what these players brought to us as NBA fans. Because I can say, speaking personally as a Clippers fan, but really as a fan of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, as a fan of the OKC Thunder when they were coming up, watching that team in the bubble that you never thought would be able to tear up any trees, and then suddenly Chris Paul went in and was the veteran guy on that team, and they thought he would be like a Udonis Haslem type vet where he may just be bottom of the bench and not necessarily contributing a whole lot on the court, and then suddenly he's one of the players of that season really in OKC. I think made it to the second round in the bubble there. So an incredible career for Chris Paul, an incredible individual legacy, and one that I think will for me and you really, Drew, live long in our memories now.
Yeah, and just think about this, since you mentioned legacy. One play away. Remember the Clippers, up 3-1 against the Rockets. They win that series. History probably changes. And then also for the Houston Rockets, they have control of that series of that great, great Golden State Warriors team. And he pulls his hamstring and the Rockets lose in Game 7. And so, the history could be written completely different. And that's why I said that it's a lot of factors, and sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way. But before you move on, let me ask you this. Do you believe it was always in the cards that this will be the final season, or do you think he kind of saw the landscape of, the DNPs and that the game was kind of moving past him and he made this decision abruptly? What do you think? Where do you lie on that side of the fence?
I think it's probably a combination of the two, which I know is kind of hard to comprehend. But I imagine going into this season, he was probably starting to feel his body, starting to feel all the things that you do when you're coming into. I mean, unless you're LeBron James, any normal NBA player would feel that coming into their 21st year, and being a 40-plus-year-old and things like that. And I imagine Chris Paul has sort of taken stock of everything that's happened over the past couple of years, even his time with the San Antonio Spurs and stuff. And he's a very intelligent guy. Like, this decision won't have happened because of 5 DMPs in a row or whatever. He played some valuable minutes for the Clippers against the Cavs last night. He had the Clippers looking like they could potentially make a comeback in that game. So I believe there's still areas of the game that Chris Paul can contribute to, particularly on a roster that's not trying to be as good as the Clippers is. For example, if he wanted to just extend his NBA career even more. But he was going back to North Carolina, his home, when the Clippers played the Charlotte Hornets. I think he probably earmarked that as that would be a nice point to be able to say, I'm going back to where it all began for me. That's the place where I'll announce that I'm hanging them up, and calls time on a brilliant career. And even though I know this is not what you're trying to do necessarily, Drew, but there may be people who are looking at it and thinking that he got some DMPs and that's the reason he decided to call time. This is a guy who contributed so much and will continue to contribute more to this Clippers team over the course of the season too. I have absolutely no doubts about that. And rather than sort of speculate over whether it's an abrupt ending to an NBA career made on the sort of whim of that decision, again, as me and you have already done so far, I'd rather give Chris his flowers for everything he was able to contribute before that, because it certainly meant a lot to me as a Clippers fan, and he'll continue to, I guess, mean even more to me now as this season goes on, because this retirement tour is going to keep rolling. I hope there's no LeBron James announcement coming up that's going to overshadow it for CP, because as much as I'm a big fan of the Banana Boat Boys and the Carmelo Anthony's, place in that as well. I'd like LeBron to just give Chris his moment here. Let's not overshadow this. Don't get me wrong. I would love LeBron James to retire, in the sense that I would like the Lakers to not be as good as they currently are. But we'll transition over, Drew, into our understated stories of the week, because I've got something for LeBron and the Lakers coming up in my bold prediction next up. But do you want to take the rock for the understated story of the week first?
Yeah, I got you. And we kind of touched on it last week. You talked about the Detroit Pistons, but I want to go a little bit further. Cade Cunningham, he's a guy that he's becoming a superstar right before our eyes. And I don't think everyone nationally is recognizing that. The stars are beginning to align. First of all, the Detroit Pistons are first in the East, which I don't think anyone saw coming. I think everyone saw them being competitive. They're number 2 in the entire NBA. And then last week, it was announced on Kevin Durant's podcast that Cade Cunningham is getting a signature shoe. There's only 6 guys in the league with one, so that is a pretty big deal. There's over 400 players in the league. And, early this morning, for the first time in his career, he is on the Kia MVP ladder. And, he's and this is what really shocked me out of everything, because we know what type of player he is. We know what type of scorer he is. But this absolutely shocked me. You know who's leading the league in assists right now?
Go on.
Jokic, which that's crazy, right? Jokic is leading the league in assists. You know who's second? Cade Cunningham is second in the league in assists. That blew me away, just because obviously we know that he can play make, but I didn't know that he could play make at that type of level. So not only is he getting it done from being a superstar, being that guy you could give the ball to and he could take you to the promised land and he could deliver, but he can also make his guys better, which is a huge prerequisite of being a superstar. And the Detroit Pistons are, I forget the stat that we came upon last week, that they're sitting in this position in the East for the first time in 20 years. So Cade Cunningham is my underrated story of the week. If you don't know who he is, he's from Dallas, Texas. He was ranked number 1 when he was coming up, and it was funny in that KD podcast is that he said that he always felt like an underdog, and KD was like, "What do you mean? You were ranked number 1 in the nation?" And he was like, "I just never felt satisfied." And so, what a great story, Cade Cunningham. Get him on your radar ASAP.
Absolutely, yeah. Shout out to Cade and Detroit. They continue to roll on at the top of the East, with those Toronto Raptors sneakily creeping up behind them. We've focused a lot on the good with this, and I don't want to come in here and bring negative vibes, but I'm also all about bringing balance. And my understated story of the week, I was very high on the Chicago Bulls at the start of this season. The Bulls beat the Wizards the other night by a single point, and what we saw after the game was something that I don't want to say it upset me, because that might sound like I'm a bit like old man shouting at clouds kind of vibes, but Nikola Vucevic was calling out his teammates for a poor performance, and he accused them of showing arrogance after the game, which I think is a good vet move, and it sort of flies in the face of this culture of guys interrupting on-court interviews post-game, which seems to be more prevalent now when you've got the OKC Thunder all gathering around for their post-game interviews. The Phoenix Suns did it after beating the Timberwolves the other day as well, and in this game you had Jalen Smith and Matas Buzelis interrupting Nikola Vucevic, and you could see he was clearly not happy about it. And I just want to sort of say that I think there's a very thin line between showing good team chemistry and showing arrogance. And especially when young guys are flexing when they haven't necessarily earned the right to, like the Bulls beating the Wizards by a single point, as good as I thought the Bulls were to start the season, and as much as any win in the NBA can be, important for a team on any given night, like the Wizards are a terrible, terrible basketball team right now. It doesn't mean a lot for you to beat the Bulls by a single point. And I know we're in a young man's league now, but I think it also needs vets like Vooch to call out this. I'm going to call it, like, I think it's corny behaviour. I think it's corny behaviour to be, making not only the reporter's job harder when they're trying to ask questions to guys after the game and find out areas of games that went right or wrong, especially in this case because the Bulls were not particularly good in that game. And then you've got Buzz Ellis and Jalen Smith, and it's not just those guys. There's so many guys around the league who do this kind of thing, but interrupting the post-game interview, and even then when their vet shows that he's not happy, Jalen Smith's calling him out like, why aren't you happy, and stuff like that. And I just kind of want to shout out to Vooch and the vets around the league, because there's, as I say, team chemistry. I'm all for young guys having a good time. I'm all for, like, I'm never gonna be someone who tries to poo-poo that in any way, but just like I would sort of urge young guys around the league to be careful of that being misportrayed as arrogance, because it definitely is a thin line. And again, I just don't think beating the Wizards by a single point is a particularly impressive thing. More fool me if maybe I'm just underestimating what it's like at the top in terms of the NBA, Drew. But we'll leave that negative stuff for now. Well, I just wanted to bring some balance to the force, because I've been so high on the Chicago Bulls and so high on those young guys there at the start of the season, though.
Yeah, no, I describe it as shenanigans, and I understand that there's an aspect of having fun and loving what you do, but there's also a professionalism aspect that's required in a post-game interview. Like, I grew up watching Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. It was always a professional, message that was being given, and so when you got guys jumping around in the background, it can become a distraction. Obviously, what OKC did last year, I don't even know if they still do it this year. It was fun, but, when you're winning like that, kudos to you. It's just like the time where LeBron Cleveland Cavaliers, like during the starting lineups, they would do the photos and stuff. So, like, I'm cool with a team that is having fun and doing a little bit of shenanigans, but you got to be winning a lot. When you're 9-7, no, uncalled for.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to earn the right. And who could say the OKC Thunder, for example, haven't earned the right, but the Chicago Bulls should maybe bide their time a little bit more. And also remember, the fans are watching, and ultimately, like, everything you do, especially in a public setting, is in line with the fans watching. So maybe the Chicago Bulls will do well to remember how long those fans have suffered, and they're not going to be getting out of bed for wins against the Washington Wizards, let's just say that. But we'll roll on to our bold predictions, Andrew, and I'll take the Rock first and foremost, because you took the Rock in the understated story one. LeBron is back for the Lakers. I promised I would finish this talking about LeBron and the Lakers, and he was sharing the sugar as well with 12 assists, and all is looking well in Lakerland. They beat the Utah Jazz. I think it was twice in a row. They just about edged past them last night. They cruised past them a little bit earlier in the week. However, Drew, I believe there's a storm coming for LeBron and the Lakers. They have 2 games to play this week with emotional ties against, listen, they're bad teams, the LA Clippers and Dallas Mavericks. They're bad teams this season, but emotional in the sense that this is the Clippers coming back to Crypto.com Arena, or Staples Center. Let's just call it Staples Center. We don't have to be doing all that other stuff, do we? It is Staples Center. The Clippers are going to be back in those hallowed halls. And then the Dallas Mavericks as well, and all the trade shenanigans that have happened. And this will be the first time the Lakers have played the Mavericks since Nico Harrison was fired, after just giving them that absolute layup, that alley-oop assist to help them get Luka Doncic. So I'm going to predict that the LeBron reintroduction is going to start to hit the skids this week, Drew. He's had two easy ones there against the Utah Jazz with no emotion tied to them, and I'm going to say that they lose to the Clippers and the Dallas Mavericks. I'm keen to hear your thoughts. I can already see in your face that you think my predictions are going wild after I hit that buzzer beater one. And by the way, shout out to you. You had Con Kneppel as your Kia Rookie Ladder leader from last week, and he was. Finally, Cooper Flag has been knocked off the top in the Kia Rookie Ladder. We've got Con Kneppel sat at the top of that, Cedric Coward in third, Cedric Coward sat in second, Cooper Flag down to third. Unfortunately, VJ Edgecombe is in free fall at the moment, going down to fifth, with Ryan Kalkbrenner running up top 5 there. But Drew, keen to hear your thoughts on another hugely bold prediction from another Homer bold prediction as well. By the way, I thought I'd learned my lesson, but apparently I haven't. And then I'm keen to hear your prediction too.
Yeah, you are literally standing at the batter's plate with your eyes closed, and you're just hammering away at the bat. Like, you're just swinging for the fences. But in the meantime, you're dislocating your shoulder because you're swinging the shit out the bat and you hit nothing but air. This is a wild prediction that you would like to hope would happen because obviously it's your Clippers that are involved, and so there's nothing that the Clippers are currently doing to make me believe that anything positive is coming. Although Kawhi returned last night, but it looked like he exited early as well. So who knows with Kawhi and his health, but. The Clippers right now are just in survival mode, but so I don't see that happening. But nice one. Anyway, I'm going to go to something a little bit more realistic, and I said I was going to, talk about it a little bit further. So let's go back to the Cleveland Cavaliers because I want to talk about Donovan Mitchell. He's a six-time All-Star that's coming off a first-team NBA selection last year, and you ask yourself, well, how do you get better? How do you one-up that? Well, you just have a career high in points. He's averaging a 30 ball so far this year. And, from the three-point line, he's taking more. He's making more. He's making 3.9 threes a game, which is second behind Chef Curry. But then also it's his efficiency inside the paint. Like his twos, he's having a career year in two-pointers, his mid-range, his paint touches, and his layups. And I'm going to say the next three games they have Toronto, Atlanta, Boston before you and I meet again. And I'm going to go out on the fence and say he's averaging 30. He's also second behind Giannis in 35 points or more in cup games. So this upcoming Friday, they got another cup game. He fell short against Indiana. He only had 32, but he was knocking on the door. I'm going to go above that and say in these three games, he's going to average 38. He had 37 last night. And the reason why I'm going there in this bold prediction is because what I said earlier, he has his Robin back now. And so that's going to relieve so much pressure. He scored 32 on Friday, and it looked absolutely effortless. And now the defense can't 100% key in on him because you got Garland back. Again, Garland is not only a rim threat, but he can also dish it as well. So he's going to see easier looks. And so shout out to my guy, Donovan Mitchell, going to average 38 points. And he's also going to finish as Eastern Conference Player of the Week.
Oh, I like it. He looked hot against the Clippers last night. I'll be completely honest. Garland had a slightly indifferent game. It felt like the Clippers were able to deal with Garland and some wild shot selection a little bit easier. But Donovan Mitchell, doesn't matter how wild the shots are that he selects because they go in. That's one thing you would definitely say about Donovan Mitchell. But it's Thanksgiving week over in the States. There'll be no slate of games on the Thursday this week. But as me and Drew have alluded to, there plenty for us to get excited about. Hopefully a little Clippers win against the Lakers in there. And then, I'll care less about the Dallas Mavericks one, but if my bold prediction can come in, then all will be well. Drew, me and Drew are 1 for 1 on predictions so far. Well, one and one, we should say, drawing for correct predictions so far this season. So we'll see who is leading coming into next week if either of those predictions come in. But in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been listening and supporting the podcast so far. Me and Drew are going to keep providing our insights into the NBA world from over here in the UK. But that's going to be enough from me for this episode. So, Drew, lead us out.
Happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners out there, regardless if you're American, British, European, and just be thankful for being able to breathe. Sometimes you got to take a moment and be appreciative of the very small things in life. I am thankful for you taking time out of your day, your life to tune in to Josh and I. Thankful for my family. I'm thankful that basketball is a big part of my life and we get to cover it. And so thankful for all of those things. And in the meantime, make sure you continue to support, drop the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe. That helps us out a lot. And until then, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. We'll catch you guys next week. Peace out.